Welcome again, Taffers. It's time to start episode 5. And in this episode, we're going to take a look at custom textures for the most part. However, before we go into that, before we jump into that huge topic and rechange this entire place to make it look more modern, we're going to take a look at a couple of tips, useful tips I'll call them. Tips which I forgot to mention last time and a couple of people pointed them out to me. So here we go, useful tip number 1. Last time you might remember I did a lot of cloning, right? So I would always select an object or a brush or something, then I would hit this button, clone, and hold shift, left click and drag to create a copy right next to it. Well, that is all fine, but there is a much easier way because cloning already has a hotkey assigned to it. That hotkey by default is insert. So I press insert while I have this selected, I hold shift, left click, drag, and create a copy. However too, the insert key for me at least is all the way on the other end of the keyboard and I'm using my left hand for the keyboard, like moving the camera like this, so it is rather impractical for me. Therefore, I'm going to reassign it. If you want to do the same, follow me. Close Dromed, go into default.bnd and open that in Notepad. Inside that file, near the top, there should be this line. Edit, bind, insert brush. It says brush, but it also works with objects as you could see. Now change this one, this is the hotkey. I'm going to change mine to tab and save it. Of course, since I already have tab assigned to this cycle brush, I need to remove it there to prevent a conflict and the end of the world. And let's just do a really quick test now. So I have this selected, I press tab, hold shift, left click, drag, and I have cloned it successfully. Perfect. Useful tip number 2. Last time we were working with objects, right? And we were changing their models. So we went to properties, clicked add, went to shape and model name, and here we had to type the model name of the object we had in our object directory. And we had to remember that name. However, even if you don't remember that name, you can just go to object, rename this, copy this name, and then just paste it here, and there you go. And makes it actually much faster. And with this comes useful tip number 3. If you gave an object a property which you didn't mean to give it, for example this, I want to take it back now, all you need to do is select it and go to delete, and delete that. Useful tip number 4. Let's say you want to place a statue, but you have no idea where in the object hierarchy you would find a statue. So what you can do is you can close this, go over to the command box and type find _obj and then type statue, for example. Hit enter. It will take you straight to the object hierarchy to where the statues are. Basically to the statue archetype, and there you can see all the statues that Thief has to offer. Same thing, for example, if I'm looking for tombstones. Find obj tombstone. It takes me straight toward tombstones, and I can choose from those. Useful tip number 5. As you are building your level with brushes and everything, and then you room brush your level, you want to make sure sometimes, or often, that you haven't missed a spot and that everything is safely room brushed. Now the one way to do it would be to jump everywhere like a crazy bunny, and possibly to even shoot arrows into the ceiling and walls to make sure everything is room brushed properly. However, there is a much easier way. Let's take a look at it. Let me just create an airbrush here with the doorway for testing purposes. There we go, portalize. There we go. So this is room brushed, but once I step here, this really isn't, right? Now, bring up the command box in game, Control P, and get rid of this and type show _bad _rooms, plural there, and hit enter. Now, as you can see, it lit up like a Christmas tree. So what that means is that every area that hasn't been room brushed shows up with this pink color, and therefore you can tell if you have missed a spot like near the ceiling or somewhere, or if you have more complex rooms and more complex architecture. This is really useful. Useful tip number 6. Let's say that your mission has like 1,000 concrete objects, and for example you are somewhere far away working on something else, and then you are like, I need to work with my object and I only remember the object number, I don't know where it is. I need to get to it. How do I get to it? Look for it in the whole mess of a level? Well, what you can do is you can find _object and type in the ID of the concrete object in your world, which for example would be 4, and we go to our silver nugget, but now how do we actually get to it with the camera? Well, while we have the nugget selected, we can type com, as in camera, underscore to underscore brush and hit enter. And that takes us straight to our desired object. Useful tip number 7. You might have come across this thing before. If you haven't, this is what we call a white wedge. I'm sure you wouldn't have guessed that. And what this is Dromed's way of telling you that it couldn't find a model for a certain object, or that the object doesn't have a model. So this can appear in a variety of situations. For example, I want to adjust the properties of our silver nugget by adding shape, model name, and NV locket. But I misspelled the name and I type locket with 2 T's. And click enter, and done. Damn it. What happens is a white wedge. And if you look into the mono window, Dromed actually even warns you, failed to load model NV locket for object 3. So it doesn't leave you hanging, it tells you exactly what went wrong. This program can actually be relied on at times. Anyway, going back here, this can happen either if you misspell this, or if you spell it right but you forget to put the actual object in the object folder, so Dromed can't find it. And the reason for this wedge was because I placed jewelry archetype instead of one of its children, and the jewelry archetype doesn't actually have any model. It just establishes the loot properties for all the jewelry inside it, but doesn't actually have a model, so there's no point placing that in the world. And finally, the last useful tip for today. So if you have worked with objects for some time, you might have noticed that the IDs of the concrete objects actually change. And that's true, that's because Dromed is being funny. Basically, every time Dromed restarts, it changes the IDs of concrete objects in your level. But the main point here is that you don't actually need to worry about that because it doesn't matter at all. Any kind of scripted event or, links and stuff we'll learn about a lot, whatever kind of intricate setup you create with these object IDs, Dromed will adjust them accordingly every time it restarts and changes them. So if this locket is now 6 and it will later be, 32, Dromed will adjust everything else to match that, so anything you create is still going to stay intact. So those were the useful tips for today. Now let's finally take a look at the custom textures and change this whole environment. Firstly, a bit of theory. Textures fall into 2 main categories: seamless, or also called tileable textures, and then any other textures or pictures that somebody could take with their camera, for example. The difference is in the seams. If you try to cover a surface with a non-seamless texture, you will clearly be able to see where the texture begins and where it ends. The transition isn't smooth, and it could therefore only work if we used the entire one image for the entire surface, for example like this. Now the other category, seamless or tileable textures, are images that have gone through some editing and are created so well that we can cover an entire surface with them and can't see the seams. That makes them very flexible and also ensures a realistic experience. Alright, so now let's head over to the internet and try to find some textures. A good place to start is cgtextures.com, that's over here. It's a huge site with lots of textures and most of them are seamless, so it's ideal for us. Let me go to brick, for example, go to medieval, and let's choose something for the walls first. For example, mixed size. This one looks pretty good. And you can even see it's seamless. You can see the tiling preview. They give you like how it looks when you basically tile it on a surface. So let's download this by clicking on the picture. And now what do we do with the texture? So now that we have the texture downloaded, we need to edit it at least a little bit. So open it in some kind of, program like paint.net or Photoshop or GIMP or whatever you're using. If you are not using any of those, you can just download paint.net. It's a simple, easy to use, free program. And I'm just gonna, do the same thing here so you can just follow what I do. Anyway, we have the texture here. It's a nice texture. First thing we need to do, we need to resize it. So go to image and resize. Currently the texture is 700 times 700 pixels. And Dromed wouldn't like that because Dromed only likes the power of 2. So the texture needs to have 2, 4, 8, 16, 32 and so on. Here it would be something like 512 is the closest. You can of course resize it so the ratio is different, like 512 times 1024. You can do that. Of course, this would just disfigure the texture because it's a square texture. So let's just do 512, or if you don't want to lose any quality by shrinking it, you can enlarge it to 1024 times 1024. However, I think 512 is just enough, so let's just use that. Click enter. So now we have resized it. Another thing that I do, and that is not compulsory, it works even like this, but I just do that out of, because I can. So what I do is I go to these hue and saturation, I slightly raise the saturation and darken it with lightness a little bit, and then I go to brightness and contrast, and I lower the brightness a little bit and raise the contrast. Maybe a bit more. What this does, it makes the texture look more dark, and it goes easier with all the thief stuff, because these textures are mostly taken outside, like the pictures are taken outside, I think, and you can sort of see they are lighter than the rest, and it sort of doesn't fit in a certain way, even with the lighting in thief enabled. So it's good to darken it and sort of sharpen it a little bit, play with it a little bit, to make it more thief-like. So this is pretty good. Now we need to save it. Whenever you save the texture, save it as, and change the format to PNG. That's the most common format for thief textures. So change it, for example, as brick or red brick Dale 1, for instance. It basically needs to be a name that isn't being used by any other texture in the game, so naming it after yourself pretty much takes care of that. Okay, close this. And now we have this texture. Let's delve over to Thief 2 Metal Age, and now we need to create a new folder here. That folder is going to be called fam, as in family, and you already know what families are. So the fam folder inside, you need to create your own family, which I'm going to create mine, call it Dale, for example. And yeah, all the other families are actually stored in the Thieves files elsewhere. We'll take a look at those at some point, but it doesn't matter now. These are just your families. So fam inside Dale, and inside we put our texture. Now this is the basic setup for a texture. We basically have it in our family folder, which is called Dale, and the folder Dale is inside the fam folder, which is inside Thief 2 Metal Age in our fresh Dromed, main directory. Now let's launch Dromed, open our mission, and if we go to textures, you remember how we were loading textures through this? We can load either a family or we can load a texture. It's always good to get into the habit of loading just the textures, because that way you will never overwhelm Dromed by accidentally loading too many textures. And by overwhelm, I mean crash. So go over here, there should be your folder, your new family which you created. Inside there should be your new red brick Dale 1 texture. Click on it. And now you should have your own family here and your own texture here. Perfect, that's your texture. Now we can just use the same system as we were using before. Left click on that, left click on a surface, and there you go. Now before you start laughing, because I'm laughing already, this is what happens when you basically create custom textures, because Thief is accustomed to using low resolution textures, and we just introduced a high resolution texture. Now what you could do, first thing we could do is you could just change the scale, but that would be unhealthy for Dromed because you would need to change it to like 13 or something. So there is a much easier way. Let's go to the family again, to the folder. So fam folder, Dale, over here. We need to create an MTL file. That is basically a text file. So let's create a text document, just a txt document. Name it the same thing as our texture, red brick Dale 1 dot, and the extension is MTL. Yes, I want to change it. Make sure that you actually have the extension set to MTL and not MTL.txt. That, wouldn't work. So an MTL file, an empty text file basically. So what is an MTL file? Well, an MTL file is a powerful tool which can give your texture some crucial attributes. There are lots of attributes you can set, but for now we're just going to stick with one, and that one is terrain underscore scale and then a value. We're going to start with the value 256, 256. That's for this direction and that direction basically, like the X and Y. So what this does basically is it tells Dromed to resize the texture to a smaller scale. But for it to work, we gotta go back here, right click on the texture, and click here, reload Dale, basically reload the texture. That reloads the texture. So you could see 256 might not do it because it's still a little bit too large. So let's go back here, open the MTL file and try 128. Yeah, save it, go here, right click here, reload the texture again, and now it's pretty much fine, I think. Now it looks pretty good. Yeah, that's about the right size. And as you can see, it is still on scale 16 over here in Dromed, so it is still very healthy for everything. It doesn't, crash, cause any kind of mayhem. So this is why it's a good idea to use MTL files for every custom texture you introduce. And it would also be a real pain to have to rescale every single wall if your texture was too large. That would just be, endless rescaling. So this makes it a very convenient process. Now, of course, one wall wouldn't do. Let's just texture this entire place. And how we do that? Well, very easily. Let's just go here, sort of move around, and just this room will do for now. So as you can see, we can see our texture everywhere. It looks pretty darn good. And since we darkened it and raised the contrast a little bit, it goes pretty well. Gotta relight the level, hold on. Relight the level. It goes pretty well with the rest of the level. I mean, yeah, it's kind of dark. And once we introduce torches and lights, we'll be able to see better how it actually works. So now that we have successfully placed our new texture, we gotta do one more thing. If I place the texture on the floor and walk on it, notice something? There is no sound because the Dromed doesn't know what kind of texture it is. Every texture, as I may have mentioned before in the game sys, every texture has its own attributes in the game sys, and this one hasn't been introduced to the game sys yet. So we gotta go to F5. These are the archetypes. If you drop down here and go to textures, this is where you can see all the textures. So there's like materials, there's for example metal. Under metal you can see all these textures and they are basically just placed here so they know they are made of metal. They have all those attributes, no rope arrows and stuff like that. And then there's our texture over here, Fam Dale, Red Brick Dale. That's our texture and it's outside all these categories because Dromed doesn't know what to do with it. So what we need to do, we need to just take it and carry it over to one of these categories as we see fit. Now, before you do that, let me just stop you there. There is a horrendous, I don't know if it's a bug, but it's irritating as heck. If you go to this drop-down list and then click on something and try to carry it, Dromed will actually think you are still in the drop-down list and it will sort of flip over and crash the whole thing. So what you need to do is you just need to make sure you are in this actual window by clicking on a few other items, then clicking your texture and then left click, hold and drag it to your particular, area or class. So our class would be, for example, stone, I think. This is stone, right? It's brick. Just carry it over here, close it, go to game, and there we go. After this, we of course need to go to file and save game sys because we have, changed our game sys. Our game sys is dancing brick sys, right? So let's just save it. Also, when you work with game sys, it's also a good idea to get into the habit of doing it with numbers. So dancing brick sys 1, save, and again you gotta set game sys dancing brick sys. Geez, that's a long name. See how the unnecessarily long name now is just, being unnecessary. And there we go. And now save the missions because we have assigned a new game sys. And our mission is fooling around 21. Yeah, lots of save files in various points. But it is necessary, so whenever something happens, like you accidentally change something in the game sys and save it, you always have a backup. So now the texture sounds like stone, it has the MTL file, and it is working very properly. Perfect. So now let's find something for the floor. Earlier when I was showing you the difference between seamless and non-seamless textures, I actually came across an interesting texture. Let me find it. Here it is, this one. So it's a non-seamless texture, obviously, but if we use it for the entire floor, like the block upstairs, over here, and then the one downstairs, and then just leave the stairs, could be quite interesting. Let's try that. So again, we gotta open it in Paint or some kind of other, program, Photoshop, GIMP, whatever you're using, and resize it so that it actually is a power of 2. And here we have a little bit of a problem because the textures ratio is actually 4:3, and we can't do that. Dromed can only use like 4:2 or 4:4. Yeah, so here we have two options. We can either shrink this one to 512, or we can make both 1024 and stretch it. Now, I am usually a fan of stretching textures rather than shrinking them, because that way we don't lose any quality, and in Dromed we can always adjust this, So let's save it as this. I don't think we need to darken it too much, but we might try. Let me see. If we go here, give it a little bit of a contrast there. Could be interesting. Okay, let's just save it like this and call it non-seam floor. That's too long. Just Dale floor 1. Yeah, something that hasn't really been used by Thief before. We put it in the same place. Fam, Dale, and over there. And we do the same thing with this. So we can just copy this MTL file, paste it here, rename it, and name it Dale Floor 1. And the contents can pretty much be the same, I think. We might need to adjust them later on, we'll see. So let's place the texture first. By loading it, texture, where are we? Dale, it's not there? What? What do you mean it's not there? Oh! Damn it, I forgot one important thing. We gotta save it as a PNG file. Damn it. Yeah, this can happen. So, save it as a PNG file. Might as well get rid of this JPEG file. And now it should be here. Texture, Dale, and there it is. Of course. So we can put it here. Go into Game. And I think we might need to set the scale to be a little larger than this. So go here, set it on 256 and save, and right click on this one and reload it. And again, go in Game. Now it's the ideal size. However, we gotta, rotate the texture a bit, or not rotate, but, move it like this. So moving it by scrolling it a little bit, there, and oh yeah, we gotta scroll it like this. I can't really see. This is a very weird. There we go. How does it look over there? Just about fits. Brilliant. Well, it doesn't look stunning, but I guess it could work. This is really, like, from the artistic point of view, there is, like, I'm not gonna judge this at all. I'm just gonna sort of show you how to work with textures that are seamless and that are not. Let's see if we can place it down here as well. So also place it there and adjust these accordingly. Oops. Okay, I got an idea. We're gonna push it over here. We're gonna push it over to these stairs. So it ends right there. And then, I was gonna do this anyway. We're gonna sort of do a little beam work around the edges of this room to make it a little different. But you know what? Despite the fact that non-seamless textures can work, I think this actually won't. I don't know, I'm just feeling really like this texture is kind of not working out at this point. But whatever, let's just use it because we've already placed it. So this texture, Dale Floor, go to Game Sys, go over to Textures, and I'm just gonna save and show you the bug because it's hilarious. I'm gonna save as 22. And I gotta show you something else as well. So anyway, go to textures, and as you are going in this, drop down window, just select it, and oh, it doesn't crash anymore. Alright, good news everyone, this doesn't crash anymore for some reason. Either it's 1.22 and I was using 1.21 before, or it was something on my end, whatever. If it doesn't crash, celebrate. If it crashes, just restart it. Anyway, back to textures. So it might happen to you that as you introduce a new texture and place it in the world, you forget to either put it in the game sys, or you forget to save the game sys, or any of the possibilities in between. Anyway, when that happens and you want to assign your texture a sound because it doesn't make any sound, all you need to do is go back to textures, and as you notice, the texture is no longer here. It disappeared. Normally it would be down here and you would just drag it over to one of the classes, right? But it's not here anymore. So where is it? It is in archetypes, the normal objects, under missing, right here. However, there is a slight hindrance, you can't really move it from here. So what you need to do, you need to remember the path. So that is t_fam/dale/dalefloor1. All you need to know. Then delete it. So once you memorize it, just delete it. Say yes, it disappears from here. Go back to textures, click on the class you want to assign it to, in this case probably stone, I guess, yeah? Click add, and type it here, t_fam/dale/dalefloor1. And hit enter, and it's among the stone, textures. Close this, and it works. And now don't forget to save the game sys this time.